The train screeched out of the depot with a blast of smoke, leaving behind a woman who realized far too late that her husband had not returned. Amelia Harper clutched her travel bag so tightly her knuckles whitened. For the past 7 hours, she had sat stiff-backed on the splintered bench of the San Duval railway station, eyes darting toward the dirt road where her husband, Charles, had promised he'd fetch water. The sky had shifted from gold to bruised gray, the desert wind carrying dust across the empty tracks, but still no sign of him. Each passing minute carved deeper into her chest. Her corset pinched against her ribs, but it was the gnawing fear that suffocated her. Had Charles abandoned her in this place? She replayed his last words, "Wait here, I won't be long." They now sounded like a cruel joke. The station itself was desolate, nothing more than a sagging wooden platform, a squeaking signpost, and a drunk telegraph operator who hadn't stirred from his chair in hours. A few townsfolk had come and gone, their eyes lingering on Amalia with thinly veiled pity before disappearing into wagons or saloons. And now, as twilight bled into night, she was alone. A coyote howled in the distance, its cry splitting the silence. Amelia shivered, drawing her shawl tighter. The lantern beside her flickered low, its light barely enough to push back the shadows. She wanted to believe her husband would appear running, apologetic, arms full of water bottles, but her heart whispered otherwise. Then, from across the tracks, came the crunch of footsteps, heavy, steady, deliberate. Amelia's breath caught. She turned her head slowly, pulse drumming in her ears. Emerging from the line of mesquite trees, his silhouette towering against the last shred of light, was a figure unlike any she had ever seen. Bare-chested save for leather straps, long black hair gleaming like river stone, beads and feathers swaying with each step, an Apache warrior. Her heart lurched. In this land, a lone woman abandoned at night was as good as prey. Yet something in the warrior's eyes, dark, unflinching, unreadable, made her hesitate between terror and an inexplicable pull. The warrior stopped at the edge of the platform. The air seemed to thicken between them. "You've been waiting too long," he said, voice low as thunder rolling across the desert. Amelia's lips parted, but no words came. Her breath trembled in the cool desert air as the warrior's shadow stretched long across the platform, swallowing the fragile circle of lantern light. She had heard stories about Apaches her whole life, most told in fearful whispers, exaggerated by drunken cowhands and mothers eager to keep children from wandering too far. Savage, merciless, wild. Yet the man before her was none of those caricatures. His stance was proud, his gaze steady. Even the way he held himself, calm, controlled, was nothing like the bloodthirsty raider tailies she'd been raised on. Still, he was dangerous. Of that she had no doubt. Amelia's throat tightened. "Who are you?" The words rasped, thin and fragile, but at least they broke the silence. The warrior tilted his head, the faintest trace of curiosity in his eyes. "Name is not for strangers," he said evenly. "But you have been waiting for too long." Her pulse quickened. How long had he been watching her? The thought clawed at her nerves. "My husband," she faltered, the word tasting bitter. "He'll be back. He went to fetch water." The warrior's gaze flicked to the canteen at his hip, then back to her pale, strained face. 7 hours, he said. Not a question. A statement. The number struck her like a stone. She hadn't realized someone else had been keeping count. As if time itself had turned into a noose tightening around her. Maybe something happened to him, she said quickly, the defense tumbling out before she could stop it. She didn't want to believe Charles would abandon her. He was stern, yes, selfish at times, but not cruel. Not a man who would leave his wife stranded at a station on the edge of nowhere. The warrior took a step closer, and Amelia stiffened, clutching her bag to her chest. The boards of the platform groaned beneath his weight. The lantern light glinted off his beaded necklaces, catching in the shadows of his sculpted frame. "You are alone now," he said, voice low, almost solemn. "No man leaves his woman to wait through the setting of the sun unless he has chosen not to return." The words cut deep. Amelia shook her head fiercely, her curls coming loose from their pins. "No, you don't know him. You don't know. U.S., he'll be back." But her protest rang hollow, even to her own ears. The warrior studied her a moment longer, then his eyes softened, not pity. Exactly, but something steadier, grounded. He set a waterskin gently on the edge of the bench. "Drink. The desert takes from the weak. You will not last the night without strength." Her fingers itched to reach for it, the dryness in her mouth nearly unbearable, but pride held her back. Accepting meant admitting she needed help. Accepting meant acknowledging her husband was not here to provide it. "You expect me to trust you?" She whispered that. The warrior's jaw tightened. "I do not ask for trust, only sense." The wind picked up, rattling the telegraph wires overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled again, closer this time. Amelia's stomach twisted. The desert night was coming alive, and with it, the dangers she had never considered when stepping off that train earlier. Finally, with trembling fingers, she reached out and took the waterskin. The leather was worn smooth, warm from his body. She drank greedily, the cool liquid searing down her throat, and when she handed it back, her voice was steadier. "Thank you." The warrior inclined his head slightly, then glanced toward the two manas toward the horizon where the last shreds of orange light bled into purple night. "The station is no place for you now. Too many eyes, too many hungers in the dark. You must leave." Amelia's heart lurched. "Leave? With you? You have no other choice." She rose halfway from the bench, her shawl slipping from her shoulders. Fear gnawed at her. Every lesson drilled into her since childhood screamed, "Don't go with him." And yet, staying meant something worse. The empty tracks, the silence, the endless waiting for a man who was never coming back. Her hands clenched into fists. She stared at the Apache warrior, his figure solid and immovable against the encroaching night. He wasn't offering safety, he was offering survival. For the first time in her life, Amelia Harper wondered if she was brave enough to take it. The desert night fell fast, swallowing the last smear of daylight until the platform lay draped in darkness. Amelia pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders, though it did little against the creeping cold. She stood, wavering between instinct and survival, staring at the warrior who seemed as steady as the earth beneath them. "I can't just leave," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What if my husband—" The warrior's expression hardened, his dark eyes unreadable. "If he were coming back, he would already be here." Amelia's throat burned at the finality in his tone. She wanted to fight it, to cling to hope like a drowning woman to driftwood, but the hours of silence weighed heavier than her own disbelief. Her heart whispered what her lips could not. Charles was gone. The sound of laughter broke her spiral. Sharp, cruel, and far too close. Amelia's head jerked toward the shadows by the station fence. 3 figures stumbled into view cowhands. By the look of their hats and spurred boots, their breath reeking of whiskey even at a distance. "Well, what do we got here?" One slurred, eyes catching the lantern's glow. "A little lady, sittin' all alone at night." Another spat into the dirt, grinning wide. "Looks like her man's gone off and left her. Ain't that a shame?" Amelia's blood turned cold. She clutched her bag closer, instinct screaming to run, but her legs rooted to the boards. The Apache warrior stepped forward, placing himself squarely between her and the men. His shoulders squared, every line of his body carved with quiet warning. He didn't move fast, didn't brandish a weapon, but his presence alone shifted the air. One of the cowhands let out a low whistle. "Well now, ain't this something? She's got herself a savage for company." The others laughed, but it was brittle, forced. They had expected easy prey, not a guardian carved from shadow and strength. "Go." The warrior said simply, his voice steady as stone. The tallest of the three bristled, hand brushing the handle of his revolver. "And if we don't?" Amelia's chest tightened. She'd seen men die over less in frontier towns gunfights erupting in saloons over spilled whiskey or cheating cards. Her mind raced, panic clawing at her throat. The warrior didn't flinch. He lifted his chin, his gaze locked on theirs. "Then you will not leave." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. The cowhands exchanged uneasy glances. The leader spat again, though his swagger faltered. "Ain't worth it. Come on." With a shove of his shoulder, he turned, and the others followed, muttering curses under their breath as they disappeared into the darkness. Their footsteps crunched on gravel until the night swallowed them whole. Amelia exhaled only when she realized she had been holding her breath. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her bag. The warrior turned back to her, calm as though nothing had happened. "Now you see, this place is not safe for you." Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the bench, head in her hands. Her husband's abandonment, the stranger's threats, the vast emptiness of the desert pressing in. It was too much, too fast. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had always been taught that a woman's strength was measured in her silence, her ability to endure. Still, the words slipped out like a confession. "Why are you helping me?" The warrior regarded her for a long moment, his features unreadable in the lantern's flickering glow. Finally, he said, "Because no one else will." It was not comfort. It was truth laid bare, and somehow it steadied her more than any false assurance could have. Amelia lifted her head, meeting his gaze. "Where would we go?" He gestured toward the horizon, where the desert stretched vast and endless, broken only by the dark line of mesquite trees. "My people's camp is 2 days' ride. There is fire, shelter, safety." Her pulse quickened. To leave with him meant stepping into the unknown, into a world she had been warned against her whole life. Yet staying here meant waiting for a man who was never coming back, and perhaps meeting the cowhands again, less hesitant next time. She swallowed hard, her decision pressing like a weight against her chest. "All right," she whispered. "Take me with you." The warrior gave a single nod. No triumph, no smile, only acceptance. He extended a hand, not forcing, not demanding, simply offering. After a long, trembling pause, Amelia placed her palm in his. His hand was warm, steady, grounding her in a way the world hadn't since her train first left the city behind. Together, they stepped off the platform into the desert night. The desert opened before them like a vast ocean of shadows. The railway station shrank behind Amelia with every step, its weak lantern glow swallowed by the darkness until it was nothing more than a fading star. She walked beside the Apache warrior, her bag clutched tight against her ribs, her heart pounding with every crunch of gravel beneath their boots. The air was colder now, a sharp bite against her cheeks, though the sand still radiated the heat of the day. The sky stretched wide overhead, endless and littered with stars, so many more than she had ever seen back in the city. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of how small she was in this land where the rules of survival were written in dust and blood. "Do you have a horse?" she asked finally, her voice low, fragile in the vast silence. The warrior shook his head. "Not here. We walk until morning." The words sank heavy into her bones. 2 days, he had said. 2 days to reach his people. Could she even last that long? She thought of her corset digging into her ribs, her shoes already pinching. Charles had promised her a new life when they left St. Louis House, a fresh start, a place where he would finally prove himself. And now she trudged barefoot into the desert with a stranger who said more with his silence than her husband had with all his flowery promises. Her throat tightened. She wanted to cry, to scream, to curse Charles's name into the empty night. But all that escaped was a weary whisper. Why me? Why would he leave me? The warrior walked a few paces ahead, his silhouette framed against the starlit sand. He didn't turn when he answered. Some men are weak. The desert shows truth. Amelia hugged her shawl tighter. His words cut, not because they were cruel, but because they rang with a certainty she could not deny. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the crunch of sand and the sigh of the wind their only companions. Amelia's feet ached, her shoulders screamed, and yet something about the warrior's steady pace anchored her. When she faltered, he slowed. When she stumbled, his hand was there firm, steady, lifting her without a word. At last, when her body could bear no more, he led her to a patch of mesquite trees. He knelt, gathering dry twigs with quick, practiced hands. Sparks flew as he struck flint, and soon a small fire bloomed, its light flickering across his face, painting the beads and feathers on his chest in gold. Amelia sank to the ground, her legs trembling, her throat parched again despite the water she had taken. The fire's warmth was a blessing, chasing away the night's chill. She dared a glance at him as he worked, his movements precise, deliberate. There was a grace to him that unsettled her, a strength born not of brute force but of discipline, of a life lived in rhythm with the land. When he caught her staring, she quickly looked away. Her cheeks flushed hot, though the desert wind was cold. Rest, he said simply, placing another log on the fire. I will watch. She wanted to ask watch for what, but deep down she already knew. Coyotes, snakes, men like those at the station, this land was full of dangers waiting for weakness. She wrapped her shawl tight and lay against her bag, the fire's crackle lulling her even as fear kept her awake. Do you trust me yet? His voice broke the silence. Her eyes fluttered open. He hadn't moved, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his profile sharp against the firelight. Amelia swallowed hard. I don't know. He gave no answer, no rebuke, only a slow nod as if he had expected nothing else. Sleep crept in despite her fear, heavy and unrelenting. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was the warrior's figure, still as stone beside the flames, guarding her as though the night itself bowed to his presence. For the first time since Charles left her at the station, Amelia did not feel entirely abandoned. Amelia woke to the sting of sunlight across her face. She squinted, shielding her eyes with a trembling hand. The fire had burned down to ash, and the cool night had already surrendered to the furnace of morning. The Apache warrior was standing, silhouetted against the pale dawn, scanning the horizon with the stillness of a hawk. His long black hair caught the early light, a ripple of ink against the sky. For a moment, Amelia wondered if he had slept at all. He turned as though sensing her gaze. We move now, he said. Her body groaned in protest as she rose. Her corset bit into her ribs, her feet ached from the night's march, and her throat was already dry. But she followed. What choice did she have? The desert stretched before them in brutal beauty-rolling dunes of sand, thorny brush clawing at the ground, and a horizon so far it seemed endless. The sun climbed quickly, blazing white and merciless. By mid-morning, sweat trickled down Amelia's spine, her bonnet useless against the heat. Each step was an effort, her shoes filling with sand until every movement felt like walking through fire. The warrior moved ahead with steady strides, his bare chest glistening with sweat, muscles shifting as he carried himself effortlessly over the shifting ground. He seemed born of this place, molded by it, while she felt like an intruder destined to be broken by it. At last, She stumbled. Her knee hit the sand and her bag slipped from her grasp. She bit back a cry, humiliated by her weakness. The warrior was at her side instantly. He didn't speak at first, only crouched, his shadow falling over her. From his belt he drew a small pouch and shook it, revealing dried strips of meat and a handful of hard berries. He placed them in her hand, then uncorked the water skin. Eat, drink slowly. She obeyed, chewing the leathery meat with difficulty, sipping the water as though each drop were gold. The relief was immediate, but so was the shame. Her husband had always scolded her for slowing him down, for needing help. Now here she was, utterly dependent on a man she had been raised to fear. When she had regained some strength, she whispered, "Why do you do this? You don't even know me." He fixed her with a steady gaze, the sun glinting off the beads at his throat. "You were left behind. My people do not leave the abandoned to die." The words sank deep into her, heavier than the heat pressing against her skin. Left behind. Abandoned. Charles's face burned in her mind, his careless smile. The easy lies. She had believed him when he promised her a better life. She had followed him west with hope in her chest. And now she clenched her fists, forcing herself to stand again. "Then I'll keep walking," she said, though her voice shook. A flicker of something approval perhaps crossed the warrior's face. He nodded once, then turned and led on. The day dragged mercilessly. The sun hammered down, the earth itself shimmering with heat. Once a vulture circled overhead, its shadow sliding across the sand like a warning. Amelia's lips cracked. Her dress clung damp to her body, and her bonnet was so heavy with sweat she ripped it off and flung it aside. But whenever she faltered, the warrior was there. He pointed out cactus fruit hidden among thorns, split open a barrel cactus with his knife to let her sip its bitter water, and shaded her briefly when the glare grew too much. By late afternoon, they reached a dry riverbed. The warrior stopped, crouched low, and pressed his palm to the cracked earth. After a moment, he began to dig, scooping away the sand until a thin trickle of muddy water seeped up. Amelia dropped to her knees, staring in wonder. He filled his hands, offering the water first to her. She drank greedily, the coolness washing away her despair. When she looked up, her eyes met his, and for the first time there was no fear between them, only a fragile thread of gratitude. Stretched taut by survival, the desert was trying to break her. But with him, she was still standing. The desert evening painted the sky in bruised shades of purple and red. Heat still shimmered off the dunes, but a cool wind began to lick at Amelia's skin, carrying the dry scent of sage and dust. Her legs ached, her lips burned, yet she forced herself forward. She had begun to measure her strength not in hours but in steps, one more, then another, until the horizon no longer seemed impossible. The Apache warrior strode ahead, silent as ever, but his presence steadied her. He moved with the ease of a man who knew the land's secrets, each footfall precise, as if the earth itself bent to guide him. Amelia's thoughts had begun to drift, memories of Charles, of the station, of the way her life had fractured in. A single day when the warrior's hand shot up, signaling her to stop. She froze, heart pounding. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice dry as sand. He raised a finger to his lips, eyes narrowing. Slowly, he crouched, scanning the ground ahead. Amelia followed his gaze and saw it barely at first. A flicker of movement in the fading light. Her stomach dropped. A rattlesnake lay coiled in the sand, its diamond-patterned back blending perfectly with the desert floor. Its head lifted, tongue flicking, eyes fixed on them. Then came the sound, low, menacing, unmistakable. The rattle. Amelia gasped, stumbling back, her bag slipping from her shoulder. Her heel caught on a rock, and before she could stop herself, she fell hard onto her hands. The sharp hiss grew louder. The snake uncoiled, striking distance shrinking by the second. The warrior moved like lightning. He lunged between her and the snake, his muscles taut, his long black hair whipping behind him. In one hand, his knife flashed, catching the last glint of sunlight. The snake struck, faster than Amelia's eyes could follow, but the blade was faster. The sound was sickening, steel slicing flesh, a dull thud in the sand. The snake writhed, tail thrashing, before falling still. Its head lay severed inches from Amelia's hand. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She scrambled back, pressing a fist to her mouth to keep from screaming. The warrior knelt calmly, wiping his blade on the sand before sliding it back into its sheath. He picked up the snake's body with ease, holding it by the tail as if it were nothing more than firewood. His dark eyes flicked to hers. "You must watch where you step," he said evenly, as though he had not just killed death itself in front of her. Amelia swallowed hard, her pulse racing. It would have bitten me." "Yes," he inspected. The snake, turning it in his hands. "And you would not have lived?" Her stomach lurched at the casual certainty in his voice. She had known the desert was unforgiving, but this had been a heartbeat away from ending her. The warrior carried the snake to a flat rock, pulling a smaller blade from his belt. With quick, practiced movements, he began to skin it. Amelia turned away, bile rising in her throat. "Going to eat that?" she asked, horrified. He didn't look up. "We are." The word hung heavy in the air. Amelia shivered. Charles had once mocked her for refusing to eat rabbit stew, claiming she was too delicate for frontier life. She wondered now what he would say if he saw her here hungry, filthy, trembling, and about to share a meal with a man who had just killed a rattlesnake with his bare hands. By the time the fire crackled to life, the warrior had skewered the cleaned meat over the flames. The smell was sharp, earthy, unfamiliar. Amelia sat cross-legged, arms wrapped around her knees, staring into the fire's glow. When he handed her a portion, she hesitated. The heat of the desert, the exhaustion. In her body, the memory of the fangs flashing toward her, it all pressed down at once. Survival left no room for pride. She took the meat, raised it to her lips, and bit. The taste was gamey, strange, but not unbearable. She forced herself to swallow. The warrior nodded once, his approval subtle but undeniable. As the stars spread across the night sky, Amelia sat in silence, the fire warming her skin, the taste of snake still on her tongue. For the first time, she felt the desert teaching her not just its cruelty, but its harsh lessons in resilience. She looked at the man across the flames, his face cast in firelight, his jewelry glinting softly against his chest. He had saved her life without hesitation. And in that moment, Amelia realized something frightening, something undeniable. She trusted him more than she had ever trusted her husband. The dawn broke soft and golden, spilling across the desert like molten light. Amelia stirred from uneasy sleep. The fire burned low, the taste of snake still lingering on her tongue. For a moment, she almost forgot where she was. Then she saw him, crouched a few feet away, sharpening his blade, his long black hair glinting like polished obsidian in the rising sun. He had kept watch all night. Amelia's heart tightened. She wanted to speak, but words caught in her throat. Instead, she stood and brushed the dust from her skirt, realizing how torn, grimy, and unrecognizable she had become. Once, she had been a woman who waited politely on train platforms in carefully pressed dresses. Now she was a woman who owed her life to a stranger who lived by fire and steel. By mid-morning, the desert gave way to rolling mesas and scattered pines. The air grew cooler, fresher, scented with resin and wild grass. Amelia could feel the change. This was no longer the barren wasteland where she'd been abandoned. It was the beginning of something else. The warrior slowed, then lifted his hand. Ahead. A cluster of figures appeared on horseback, their silhouettes cutting sharp against the sky. Amelia froze, pulse quickening. Men and women, all adorned with feathers, beads, and leather, their faces unreadable as they drew closer. Her protector said nothing, but his hand brushed lightly against hers, steadying her, grounding her. It was the first time he had touched her without necessity, and though brief, it carried more weight than words. The riders circled them. One, an older man with hair streaked gray and eyes like flint, dismounted and spoke quickly in a language Amelia could not understand. The warrior replied with calm authority, though his voice carried an edge of steel. The elder's gaze shifted to Amelia. It was not cruel, but it was sharp, questioning, as though stripping away every layer of her, to see what was real beneath. Amelia's knees trembled. "She does not belong here," another rider said, in accented English. The words were flat, final. Amelia's chest tightened. She felt the weight of those words pressing down, reminding her of the railway platform, of Charles's footsteps fading away, of the hours she had sat waiting for someone who would never return. She had been unwanted then, and she was unwanted now. But before despair could swallow her, the warrior spoke again, this time in English. His voice was low, fierce, unyielding. "She has walked the desert beside me. She has faced death and lived. She belongs where she chooses." The circle of riders fell silent. Amelia stared at him, her heart hammering. His defense was more than protection. It was an offering. The elder's eyes softened just slightly, and he gave a small nod. The circle opened. It was then Amelia realized the choice was hers. She could turn back, try to find a train, search for Charles as though he had not already chosen to erase her from his life. She could return to a world where she was fragile, overlooked, and dependent on a man who had left her in the dirt. Or she could step forward, into this circle, into this fire-forged life that had stripped her bare and, in doing so, made her stronger. Into the orbit of a man who had never spoken sweet lies, but whose every action had carved truth into the sand, that she mattered, that she was worth saving. Amelia took a breath. Her feet moved before her mind could argue. She stepped past the invisible line that separated her from them, her gaze never leaving his. The warrior's lips curved, the faintest ghost of a smile. For the first time since the railway station, Amelia did not feel abandoned. She did not feel lost. She felt chosen by herself, by fate, by this wild and unforgiving land that had nearly broken her, only to remake her into something stronger. The circle closed again, but now she was inside it. And as the horses moved, as the people began their slow return to the mesas, Amelia walked beside the warrior, her steps no longer uncertain. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She only knew this: she would never again sit waiting for someone who would not come. She had found where she belonged. She had found who she belonged beside.